So does it, GA, General Assembly, does that sound boring? I hear you laughing. Yeah, okay. So I see some people out there that have been to General Assembly before. Is it boring? No. There is nothing boring about it. So I hardly even know where to start. There's so much to say, but I have a short window to say it, so I'll just say a little bit. So I've been going to General Assembly since 2016, either online or in person. I've missed a few years in that gap, but General Assembly has always been a profoundly inspirational and transformative experience for me. It's a beautiful thing for me to walk into this space with you all here every week. I show up most weeks. Just think about entering a space where thousands of people share your faith. And while most of the people in the room share my values and a desire to continue creating a multi-generational, anti-oppressive, beloved community, there is a small contingent of those who wish to uphold white, cisgender, heteronormative leadership. There is also that in GA, in the UUA. But there's lots of fun, too. Let's see, is there a slide up there for me? It's about trash. See? So I volunteered this year. If you volunteer, you get some, your registration is reduced and you get some help with the hotels. But this year I volunteered on the green team and spent my free time teaching about and sorting trash and recycling. People still like recycling, even for UUs out there, like there's a lot of resistance. So it was fun to do some teaching and sorting. And we run into the coolest people. So some of you may recognize, this year I ran into one of my spiritual directors, not pictured here, from Wellspring, and this lovely person and former board member here at UU Schenectady, Kathy McGowan. GA is always a time to catch up with UU friends, and Trish Williams and the Reverend Viola Abbott, who now live in other states. We all share this great time together. Seriously though, GA this year began with the question, how will we change the world for the better? If that's not a call to action, it's a question for transformation, followed by a week of information and inspiration for transformation in the music, the presentations, the Ware lecture on Saturday night. It's really not boring. The Berry Street lecture shared by our beloved co-ministers from their Ministers Week. There's lots. These words from GA followed me to New York to strive for the common good over individualism. This phrase was on my mind when a few weeks ago, from this very pulpit, Melissa McKinnon premised a shift in how we might live in the world if we considered switching the first principle and the seventh principle, so that we first enter relationships with others and with the earth through a mindset of the interdependent web of all existence, as we then might internalize the recognition of the inherent worth and dignity of every person as part of interdependence. And these words from GA, to listen more often to things than to beings, I don't think it means like we should not listen to beings, but to things, but it just means we don't do enough of listening to things. Again, Melissa's words about reversing the first and seventh principles might bring us to listening more to what the earth is telling us. I make a practice of connecting with the earth in many birds. I was going to say birds, but with the earth in many ways, but off open space and farmland conservation, regenerative farming practices, being fully present in forests when I visit. When I'm close to the land, I also feel a call for reparations. I'm not sure yet what that looks like. Delegates at General Assembly are asked to help choose actions of immediate witness. Our delegates conversed, actually texted, because some of us were online and we were in this big space, so we couldn't really have deep conversations, but we had deep texting conversations. We could choose 3 of 6 proposed actions of immediate witness. These are statements about a significant action, event, or development in the world that necessitates immediate engagement and action among UU member congregations and groups. One of the actions of immediate witness voted on at GA is the campaign to stop Cop City. Do y'all know about Cop City? So, if created, Cop City would be the largest police training facility in the country, destroying and replacing acres of forests. I do know that the Stop Cop City action going on in the Atlanta is relevant to my faith. The destruction of the Weelaunee Forest, neighboring a black neighborhood to build a police training facility, a mock city to practice urban warfare, is a story of oppression, of ignoring the vitality of forests as a component of mitigating climate change, ignoring the ongoing oppression of Atlanta's black residents, and ignoring all respect for the stolen lands of the Muskegee. As Unitarian Universalists, I think we're already paying attention to the calls of climate changes, things, not beings, like weather is a thing. But what if other faiths and other politicians also held the position that we might benefit if we listen more often to things than to beings? I mentioned the 7 principles as UUA is revising Article 2, which is the principles and purposes for the UUA. And I mentioned that because we're considering changing it, or the UUA, I'm going to call that we, or reflecting on our deeper understanding of institutional and cultural oppressions. And so stay tuned for the culmination of those changes. I know that Reverend Wendy and Reverend Lynn will keep us apprised of that. I attended a session on UU the Vote at GA. The UU the Vote is a national, nonpartisan, get-out-the-vote campaign and voter registration, promotion, and participation for major elections, which began in 2020. In 2022, members of this congregation sent 96,000 texts, wrote over 8,000 postcards and letters, sent 8 members to the polls as poll workers. Members also provided stamps, painted rocks, made buttons, and celebrated our honor as a good trouble congregation in the UUA. We'll go again in 2024. At GA, all of us UU the voters in the crowded room at that session acknowledged that we feel hope and joy and connection when participating in UU the Vote, and when asked what will be needed to make a difference next time, we all got tense. The tension in the room kind of like everybody held their breaths. So we turn to our faith and each other in those moments. When I show up here in this space, I have a sense of abundance. I feel confident many of you will jump in to participate in UU the Vote next year for the 2024 elections. In the meantime, local and state elections are important, and we can all participate individually by writing postcards to various states, working on campaigns on our own, and serving as poll workers. The last quote from GA I'll bring to you today: to begin to practice the evolution of, we need to begin to practice the evolution we believe in. We believe in evolution, right? So if we practice that, let's call it evolution rather than change. As we move into next, the anti-racism team here at UU Schenectady will be evolving into a Widening the Circle team. I'm not sure that's what we'll call it, but something like that. Nicole Presley, a lead organizer for UU the Vote, recently sent an email in which she summons us to a larger dream. This quote: "If we solely focus on blocking or dismantling, we reject love, sustainability, and the interdependency that anchor our faith and the very idea of beloved community. The success of our movements depend on our capacity to hold a larger vision of what we seek to build, not just what we work to dismantle. We must also find collective space to imagine and build a world where we all live in the fullness and wholeness of our worth and dignity." It's the end of the quote. That's why that has prompted me to talk with the others about transitioning from the anti-racism team to a Widening the Circle team. I just started reading the book. Oh, you took it away. Okay, I was going to show you the first page, but the next book for our Black, Indigenous, and Authors of Color book group. So I opened here at UU Schenectady. The Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. I open the book and the first chapter begins, all that you touch, you change. And all that you change, changes you. I feel like I've only got 10 or 15 years of my quickly aging life to make connections, create justice, and be the change I wish to see in the world. It's like this book is supposed to be the next book in the progression of my life. Even though I've read it before, the book speaks to me differently this time. With fascism on the rise, with the GA experience still ringing, the idea that change will change me is both consoling and animating. Now, what happened at GA doesn't stay at GA. What happens at GA continues with me. It's not a one and done. It's not just a week of deepening my faith, friendship, and sorting trash. As Imani Perry pronounced in the Ware lecture on Saturday night, I am daily reminded that this moment demands humility and courage, humbled by the voices unheeded. It is a responsibility of an active faith. It's not boring. May we build communities both here in this congregation and out in the larger community in which we all are nourished and in which we all might flourish. Thank you.
I was one of the several members of the congregation that participated in GA via Zoom. In fact, I've been to GA a number of times, but never in person. I think I've participated in about 6 Zoom GAs. So my perspective of a room filled with thousands of UUs, I've missed. However, I participated in many meetings and discussion. I voted on all the topics that were scheduled with consultation from members of the delegation. And the good news from this experience is that the technology for delegate participation and the voting process has improved enormously. It's just awesome compared to what it was like 6 or 7 years ago. And the bad news is that in-person conversations and the passion that can only be truly understood by being part of a group are sometimes, maybe always, lost through the computer conversations. One of the marked passionate topics this year was a business resolution called Complete Divestment from the Fossil Fuel Industry. Complete divestment. A group of mostly young adults petitioned the UUA to place this resolution on changing how the UUA invests its trust funds, particularly the UUA Common Endowment Fund. That fund includes investments from over 200 congregations, including ours, requiring a time of discussion and then a vote by the delegates. The business resolution demanded that the UUA completely divest from all stocks, mutual funds, and other investments that support fossil fuels in any capacity. It also included specific, yet also somewhat vague, requirements for reparations. The UU Board of Trustees distributed the following statement the week before GA and was re-articulated in the process of discussions before the vote. So I'm going to quote now the rebuttal to the proposition from this petition. The UUA Board of Trustees supports the long-existing work of the Investment Committee and the UU Common Endowment Fund on climate action, human rights, and values-based investing. Divesting from fossil fuel companies and advocating for climate action have been a long-term commitment of the UU Common Investment Fund and is an urgent priority for our faith and our planet. I'm still quoting here. However, the UUA board opposes this business resolution, complete divestment from the fossil fuel industry, which was submitted by petition because it would undermine the UU Common Endowment Fund's current values-based work on climate action and other human rights issues, close off conversations we need to have about UU values and investments, and preempt the work of the board that the board has begun around reparations, and directly cut into the UUA budget. We are committed to continuing and expanding conversation about actions we can responsibly take to urgently and responsibly address the climate crisis in the months and years ahead. End of quote.
The discussion about this business resolution was difficult and tense. One of the young adults involved had been seriously injured while protesting a pipeline, and passions were running high. Wendy and I knew from having talked with then President Susan Frederick Gray beforehand that there had been many attempted discussions with those who wrote the resolution, and that when meetings had happened, the conversations had not gone well. There had been yelling and name-calling. There had been blaming of the volunteers who tend to the Common Endowment Fund without listening to what had been done to partner with those directly impacted by the use of fossil fuels. It was complicated. If the resolution were to pass, it would also likely have a negative impact on UUA staff funding. During the discussion, people for both pro and con took turns speaking. Whether delegates were online or in person, each person who spoke went to a computer with a camera so that each speaker appeared and was heard in similar ways. The energy was high and often tense. It was nearing the end of a long week, and there was a lot at stake. When time for discussion ended, co-moderator Charles Dumond approached the podium. At the same time, there was a commotion at the rear of the hall as a couple dozen people came in, chanting loudly and moving toward the front, where they stood in a line holding signs. From where I was sitting, I couldn't understand what they were saying, but with their signs and their energy, their intentions were clear.
The young adults who have been part of this resolution were vocally upset and protested with signs and chanting for about 3 minutes. As an online delegate, it was hard for me to know what was happening in the room, as this was unplanned. Cameras and microphones were focused on the co-moderator, Charles Dumond, who stood quietly by the podium during the protest, and then he called a 5-minute break before continuing with the business meeting.
Both Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, the outgoing UUA president, and Reverend Dr. Sophia Bentoncourt, incoming UUA president, spoke against this resolution with measured tones and empathy for these young adults. They articulated clearly why this resolution was not the right one or at the right time to more successfully address the proponents' concerns, and uttered deep commitments to still take action against fossil fuel companies and to continue the work that was already underway for reparations to be made.
The resolution was rejected, 68% no and 32% yes. The passion around this topic continues with the march in New York City next week, calling our elected officials to end fossil fuels. This event will come just before the UN Climate Ambition Summit and is a powerful way to live out our UU promise to care for the earth and stewardship. The march has been endorsed by the UUA and the UU Ministry for Earth and is supported by the newly elected UUA President, Reverend Dr. Sophia Bentoncourt.
If you feel called to go to New York City next weekend, hopefully with minimal use of fossil fuels, we offer our blessings for that. And if you want to do something here, next Sunday we'll be working with the Green Sanctuary team to come up with some projects for us to do along with our in-gathering celebration starting the new year. This is a both and opportunity. We'll continue to be part of the UUA's journey, working for sustainable energy and investing that supports our values as best we can in collaboration with our community partners. This year's GA certainly affirmed that often living our faith is complicated. Other important votes that happened included electing our next UUA president and also voting on whether to continue conversations about changes to Article 2 in the UUA bylaws. This is the section that currently includes the purpose statement and the principles and sources. The proposed changes will shift the format and language to articulate shared values rather than including the principles. This is just a visual image that goes along with it. The principles can still be used. They just won't be in the bylaws. There were a lot of strong feelings about all this. There were amendments and lots of discussion. And the vote passed to continue the conversation. So this year, we'll have opportunities here to listen to one another about what these changes might mean for us. And next year's delegates will vote on whether or not to change the UUA bylaws as we continue faithfully becoming. The on-site delegates also had the privilege of a light breakfast with President Reverend Susan Frederick Gray in her last weeks of service. The top 50 generous congregations in the denomination were invited, and we passed on the invitations to our on-site delegates pictured here. The UUA is so grateful for our deep commitment to pay our annual fair share contribution and that we take our covenant to the association seriously.
I've had the pleasure of attending GA in person a couple of times and virtually a couple of times, and it's great to see the technology improving to support the online attendance. One of the sessions from GA that engaged my mind for continuing thought was called Disrupting Church. This was presented by both the minister and the DLRE of the community church in New York City. So here's just briefly a few of the thoughts from or inspired by that session. We have been through difficult times in recent years with a dangerous mix of climate change, political upheaval, and a pandemic. When the world feels harsh, we tend to contract and take care of our own core needs or go into survival mode. Community engagement wanes. We question our capacity to do more. We might need a reminder to believe in our individual and collective inherent worth, and to know that every one of us has the power to contribute something to the greater good. How might we do this? We can start by creating intentional space for joy. Bring some fresh flowers to your table. Share some kind words with those around you. Write a letter. Make a phone call. Help your neighbor start a compost pile. Is Gary out here? Yeah. Do you feel better now? Well, then come gather in community. Hey, how about join us for water communion next week? Have a picnic with us. Celebrate something. Make music. Tell stories. Feeling better now? Great. Now throw open the front doors and welcome the wider community to what is available here. And as another parting thought, know that hives of progressive liberal action can pollinate the world.
As a first-timer at GA and being there with my son, Caden, who is an 8-year-old first-timer at GA, it was exhausting, uplifting, and sometimes a bit of a tedious experience, but we're really both glad we attended. My favorite part each day was the walk into the very large main hall where everyone gathers for both church services, but also the long business meetings. So each day, as we went into each of these sessions, there was a really rad electric guitar instrumental version of Whoa Ya Ya playing. It was like, wah, 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 wah. You had to be there, but hopefully you get the sense of what it was like. This music just got us both excited to be in the room with UUs from around the country. And at one point, after hearing Whoa Ya Ya for probably the 5th time, Caden turned to me and asked, "What does Whoa Ya Ya mean?" And I had to pause because I didn't know. I'm always amazed and grateful for how often Caden helps me see the world through new eyes and reminds me to ask questions that I long ago passed over. So we looked it up. And according to the website, thebirdsings.com, Whoa Ya Ya means we keep going in a Ghanaian language called Ga. A lot of what I observed at GA was a very strong tension between what people feel Unitarian Universalism means to them as individuals versus what Unitarian Universalism means to the faith tradition in community and to those who have also not yet discovered our faith. If you took averages of this tension, it really felt like about a little more than 3/4 of the delegates really are advocating for Unitarian Universalism as a community and as a faith for and by community. But almost 1/4 of the delegates really were demonstrating thinking from a much more individualistic frame. It's hard to miss that 99% of that 1/4 cohort self-identified as white, and of those, the majority self-identified as male. I did not detect a geographic trend among that 1/4 group. I believe that all the delegates that were there representing UUSS were in that 3/4 group, the majority group, and we were collectively advocating for the community of caring ideals we envision for Unitarian Universalism. So my fellow delegates and I were in that majority cohort, and we are left to keep going in the midst of palpable and loud minority dissent. And it's not shocking to me that we will all be moving forward as UU delegates in the echoes of wisdom from Ghana. The juxtaposition of Whoa Ya Ya to this palpable tension of passionate individualism in direct conflict with community mindedness. One wonders if the swirls and tendrils of Whoa Ya Ya will or did open any hearts and minds to things not yet seen. I remain hopeful that at least a few of the dissenting hearts can open up in favor of the we over the me. Whoa Ya Ya.